The new Defender arrived and instantly made a big impact, with vast numbers of people flocking towards this rather rugged but urban-focused SUV that had loads of charm and character. Now, it was available in short wheelbase 90 and long wheelbase 110 versions, but what if that bigger 110 doesn't deliver quite the same level of space and practicality that you really need? Well, that's where this car comes in. It's the 130, and it adds some much needed space at the rear, which makes this into a true 8-seater. So if you're looking to take more people around more frequently and take along plenty of luggage, should you be considering this 130 over something like a BMW X7 or maybe a Mercedes GLS? Well, in today's video, we're going to be checking out what this new Defender has to offer to find out if it's the car that you should be picking. The 130 is blink and you'll miss it similar to the 110. It only comes when you look at that rear section, which is far longer. In fact, when you look at the rear doors and the overall rear overhangs, you can see that this car is considerably larger than the 110 that sits beneath it. This particular model is actually a range-topping V8 version too, and you can tell that through the small badges on the sides and of course the massive quad exhaust at the rear. When the Defender debuted, it brought a kind of rugged approach to ergonomics with some more upmarket features, and I thought it was really good actually. I like the central screen because it's one of the most responsive on the market, and it's got loads of nice functions too. Plus, on this one, it's got quick access to the driver assistance systems that you can switch on and off, such as the speed limit warning, which for me, I find really irritating. It bongs at you, but you can go quickly and you can adjust it into your own custom settings here or via a button on the steering wheel. The material quality is good, but it's quite robust. It's not luxurious, and bearing in mind this is a V8 version, so it's costing over £100,000. I think it might be slightly jarring with what you would expect from a car at this price point, but you do get this lovely Alcantara steering wheel. The ergonomics in general are great, and there are loads of storage options, such as this little shelf here, which is rubberized so the items in there aren't going to slip around. And there's a big section underneath here, which in this car has a cooled fridge for chocolate bars or ice creams or whatever you fancy during the summertime. Nice deep cup holders. And again, you've just got that elevated driving experience, which is so synonymous with this segment. The rugged design that you'll find at the front of the Defender carries through to this middle row. We've got rubber mats in this car, which I think are really useful because you can just take them out and hose them off when they do get grubby. These middle seats are quite upright. You can tilt them back and forth if you want to, but even in their rearmost setting, they just feel a little bit more upright than you might expect, and the seat bases themselves are quite flat and quite solid too. In this 130 version, you do get 5 individual ISOFIX points for child seats. So you can put 1 on the front passenger seat, 2 in the middle and 2 in the rear, which puts it ahead of some of its rivals in terms of that car seat usability. And then in the middle, we do have 2 charging ports and some additional controls for the heating and ventilation. The big difference between the 130 and the smaller 110 is the amount of space that you get in this final row. Now, the 130 is a dedicated 8-seater, so you've got 2 and 3 and 3. And if you do have people in this rearmost row, there's far more space than you might expect. The only real drawback is the intrusions that you're getting from the wheel arches, which dig into the side space here and mean that you have to sit with your feet slightly inboard of the car. But even with the seat in a decent position so that the person in the middle has plenty of leg room, I've still got loads of knee room. It's just the space of my feet which is just feeling a little bit squashed. In terms of other features back here, we've actually got individual charging points, and in this car, heated rear seats, which I think is particularly good. We've also got an extra roof section up here to add some light to this otherwise quite dark section of cabin. The 130 is quite a massive car, so you'd expect it to have plenty of boot space, and it does. Of course, like all Defenders, you get a side hinged boot door, which means you have to factor that in when you're parking up against the wall. Fortunately, the reversing sensors do actually factor in that spare wheel on the back, so you don't have to worry about calculating it as you're reversing. But when you're here, you've got 389 litres of space, which is actually similar to a regular hatchback. And that means that if you have got everyone aboard, you can still put a decent amount of luggage back here, though of course it's not going to be great for big weekend bags or those larger suitcases that you might take to the airport. Fortunately, you've also got electronic controls for the air suspension, so you can raise or lower the car to make putting those items in a little bit easier. There are also some lashing points, and then of course you can lower all of those seats down and extend the load area further. The 130 Defender sits on the same platform as the 110. It's the body where the extension has been made rather than with the underpinning. So the two do drive in quite a similar fashion. Of course, this car weighs a lot. It's actually near 2.7 tons all in, and that's before you've put any kit or people inside of it. And you do have to bear that in mind when you're coming into a corner. You can get the Defender round a bend in a pretty decent fashion. Anything compared to the old Defender, it's night and day different. This car steers more like a conventional SUV, and against something like an Ineos Grenadier, then again, the differences are more apparent because this just has far better steering and a far more car-like approach to driving. The elephant in the room, of course, with this Defender is that it's the V8 one, and it's not just any V8, it's the 5-litre supercharged V8 that we've become well accustomed to across JLR's variety of high-performance products. And of course, JLR does have quite a lot of experience with putting V8s in its SUVs. Older Defenders, Discoveries, and full-fat Range Rovers have always had V8s as their flagship powertrains, and so it makes sense to have it here in the 130. Of course, it's been available in the 110 and the 90 beforehand, but only recently has it been available in this bigger version. With 493 brake horsepower coming from this engine, it's enough to get the 130 from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 5.3 seconds, which is very quick for a car of this size and weight. I will say though that as lovely as it is to have a big capacity engine in a car like this with a whining supercharger accompanying the soundtrack behind you, I don't think it's the most useful setup for the Defender. I've been seeing about 19 mpg, and honestly, I haven't seen many cars chew through petrol quite like this one. You can see the dial just moving as you're going, even if you're just pottering about. It's quite a remarkable amount of fuel that this car uses. I think that the standard diesel engine for the 130 is pleasant enough and more than powerful enough in its own right too. So I think if you're doing more traditional driving, and unless you really want the very top version of the 130 that is going to cost an awful lot to run, then I'd be going for that diesel version. Naturally, one of the things you have to consider when you're driving the 130 is the sheer size of the thing. It's absolutely massive. And even when you've got a little bit of space around you, it feels like it's taking up a lot of real estate on the road. Fortunately, the corners of it are nice and square, and you do get plenty of sensors and cameras. So actually positioning it at low speeds, I don't find too tricky. It's actually a bit more like parking a big van, and I love parking vans because they're nice and square, and it's just the same as the Defender. One thing I have found to be a bit of a gripe though, is the visibility out of the rear, because unless you've remembered to fold down all the headrests, you're looking through two sets of headrests in order to look back at that rear screen, which is almost in a different postcode to where you're sitting. And that makes it a bit tricky when you're just trying to gauge what's behind you, see a little bit over the shoulder, so you just have to remember to make sure you fold down those headrests. And what about the engine? Well, the engine is very exciting, and it's almost a little bit childish to have an engine of this size in a car like this. You can drop a couple of gears and it does sound good. It's hard to ignore how nice a V8 is, especially in this day and age. But as I have mentioned, I do think that the diesel is the better choice, particularly as if you're driving this fully loaded, you're going to be seeing, well, high teens, potentially getting lower teens, and that's going to be quite expensive, even if you love a V8 engine. Would I choose this V8 version? Well, I like that it exists, and I think that it's a nice continuation of what is a key partnership between an engine and a car type. But I think most day-to-day drivers will go for the diesel. It just is way more efficient, and it makes this car into a far better long-distance vehicle rather than this V8 one, which, let's be honest, you're going to have to fill up every 20 minutes. Overall, the 130 is a very well connected and very well executed car overall. It just depends on thinking about exactly what you need from it in order to choose whether this one is better than the 110. Thank you for watching this Motors new car review on the Land Rover Defender 130. Now, if you head to the comments section, you'll be able to let us know what you think of the 130. Would you pick it, or would you opt for the 110 instead? And if you have enjoyed this video, then leave us a like underneath as well. Plus, if you subscribe to the Motors YouTube channel and hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification directly to your inbox each time we upload a new review.